And the High Court in Johannesburg, you'll recall, recently ruling that the former SABC interim board interfered with the procurement processes that led to the awarding of a security contract back in 2017. That court ruling that the awarding of the 185 million rand tender to Mafoko security patrols was invalid and should be reviewed and set aside. Well, let's speak now to the former SABC board member, Mathatha Tsedu, who joins us in studio for some context. Thank you very much for making the time to come here, Mr. Tsedu. Let me begin my question with one that says, did you become directly involved in procurement processes at the SABC at the time of the awarding of this tender?
The interim board arrived at the SABC and found so much chaos that we were involved in almost everything. We were living there almost every day. We were like an executive board. We took decisions around. I chaired a committee that made sure people were paid. That is not a duty of the board. In classical terms, that would be seen as interference.
Yeah.
But that's the situation that we found. And there were a lot of things that we got involved in. The cancellation of a number of contracts. The Gupta contract, where they had these breakfasts that were making a lot of money for them, up to about 150 million rands a year. And the SABC was carrying all the costs and getting not a single cent out of all of that. We cancelled that. It's not the duty of the board to do something like that. I would sit in meetings with SAFA to discuss payments that SAFA wanted. I sat with the producer of Mubango to beg him to continue to produce Mubango, even though we were not paying because we don't have money. That's not the job of the board. So when this tender that you're talking about came, the day before that, we get a whistleblower call that says, there's a tender on your table tomorrow at your board meeting. That tender was changed last night. The winning company has been changed. So when we get in there and we find this number one peeping number two by 0.5%.
Right.
Yeah. We already knew what had happened, and we just needed to find a way of making sure that whatever plans that have been put in place to continue with the corruption cannot continue.
And so it's clear, based on what you are saying, that you make no apologies for becoming directly involved in procurement processes. As you say, you almost became an executive board. But here's where people...
It's not just about procurement processes. The question that faced us when that tender came, there are important things you need to realize. One, this security tender had expired more than 2 years before even we arrived. And it had been rolled over in 6 months, and had now reached a point where legally you can no longer roll it. And it was expiring on the day on which we were sitting to discuss it. That day we needed to make a decision. We are either going with the suggestion, or we are changing it, or the following day there will be no security at the national key point that the SABC is. So it had been planned in a manner that we had no room to maneuver. We had to go with the suggestion, and we said we were not going to do it. And if there is a technicality that says we should have done it some other way, I don't know how we would have been able to do it properly and then be still on the fight against corruption. It was not going to be possible.
It would seem to me that you were clear in your mind that there are certain people behind Mjayeli Security Services, because that was the preferred bidder, as you put it in the Sunday Times 2 weeks ago in your opinion piece, that you were determined to ensure that this company, Mjayeli Security Services, does not get this tender. Why was that?
Our position was that whatever this corrupt system that we were now sitting over had proposed had to be stopped, because a lot of other things had happened. There was a TV license collection tender that had been given to a company that was collecting less than what it was being paid. We cancelled that. And nobody, that's why in the piece I was saying, you want to hang me? Here are the other charges for which you should hang me. Because that's not the only thing we did. We sat in that board meeting and asked the critical question. If the bid execution committee recommends X, what is the role of the board? Are we a rubber stamp that just says because the BEC has said Xoli should get it, then Xoli must get it? Or is there room for us to reach a different conclusion? Legal division was in the meeting and we asked, and they said you have a right to change, provided you've applied your mind and you have sufficient reasons. So we said, okay, this discussion that has happened here, is that enough for us to have applied our mind? And the head of legal said yes. He said, well, the reason we're giving is that Mafuko gets more on BEE scoring than the other company. And if you took that into consideration, the numbers, that 0.5 would disappear. Is that enough? And the lawyer said, in his opinion, it is. The lawyer was killed a few months after that. He was shot dead. So we had legal opinion in the board that said what we were doing was correct. But over and above that, and I keep going to this, we were convinced that this was corrupt, because there were other things we had also stopped, like a contract that was not even requested. Somebody rocks up and says, I have an idea. And the executive entertains it. But it turns out that this idea that is being brought by this person originated on a laptop of one of the most senior people within the SABC. He came with that proposal, gave it to these people. They come and he's chairing the meeting at which they are presenting. And they get 4.5 million the day after. Wow. We arrive a few months down the line. They were supposed to do websites for all the SABC outlets. Only one was up. And so we cancelled that.
I'm going to ask you towards the end whether you believe, based on what you saw there, whether there was an individual or possibly even a syndicate that was behind corruption at the SABC at that time that you were part of this interim board. But the reason I'm asking for specific persons that were behind this tender from Mjayeli, that you were so intent on disqualifying because, to use your words, this was corrupt. In the piece, you write that the chairperson at the time comes and tells the board that she is getting calls even from Parliament who are saying that, why do you want to get the ANC into trouble? And that's why I'm intent on asking for possible names. Do you know who was behind this Mjayeli Security Services, and were there political figures behind
it? I wouldn't be able to give you any names of people in the political arena. But what I know is that as soon as we made that decision, even before it was announced, the calls started. And there was this particular guy whose name I don't remember. He was in the NCOP.
Right.
Yeah, because he said he's in Parliament, he's in the Communications Committee. And we knew all the people who were in the National Assembly Portfolio Committee, and his name was not there.
Yeah.
So our chair went to the chair of the Portfolio Committee to say, who is this person? I'm getting calls from this person about a decision we have made. So he checked and then said, no, it's in the NCOP, it's in the Standing Committee.
What was their interest?
He said, what he said to the chair was that you want to bring the ANC into disrepute, and we were saying, in what way? How does this affect the ANC?
Yeah.
Now, it's either he knew something or he was using the name of the ANC for his own ends. Because when we checked his own profile, we found that there were some dormant security companies that he used to own before. Yeah. So there is what I call, Xoli, the madness, the logic in the madness.
Yes.
Yeah. You look at it and you see Saudi talking all sorts of stuff that doesn't really make sense. But in the implementation of the takeover of the SABC, there was logic. Everybody who was sitting in an important position was put by these guys. So the SCM, the Supply Chain Management Committee, was headed by somebody who had spent their entire life being PA to Saudi. There was relationships that went into what you could call nocturnal activities within the SCM and the higher-ups within the SABC. So we as the interim board, we understood where we were and what we were faced with, right, and what needed to be done.
And so when you had uncovered the corruption, as you put it, there was clearly method in the madness. At some point, you even say in the article that Mr. Motsoeneng seconded his PA to the Supply Chain Management Unit. I asked you earlier to keep in mind whether there was a central figure behind this corruption at the SABC. Was Mr. Motsoeneng the central figure, would you say?
When Saudi was there, he was it. Nobody could do anything. He would take Dr. Ngubane as the chairman of the board to a meeting with President Zuma in Pretoria. And they get there, and Dr. Ngubane would be left in the ante room. Saudi goes in, he has his yap with President Zuma. He comes out, he says, no, we can go now. So when they came here at MultiChoice to discuss that contract with MultiChoice, he came with a team. So if you look at the composition of the delegation, Saudi didn't go there alone. But once they get to MultiChoice, everybody else remains in the ante room, and he goes in, he comes out, he says, we can go now. And he gets back to the SABC, he says to the head of legal, a document is going to come, the contract is going to come from MultiChoice. So MultiChoice even gets to draft its own contract with the SABC, and you must make sure that everything moves. And the guy did, you know. So he was it.
In your words, therefore you're inferring that he was it because he had the backing of the number one citizen of this country.
He had the backing of power. He had the backing of power. Xoli, there's a guy called Mr. van der Merwe at the SABC. He's a lowly placed official in the finance department.
Yeah.
His job is to ensure that everything that comes for payment is paid. All the approvals, by the time it gets to him, all the approvals are in. So an invoice from a lawyer who was representing Saudi. I'm not mentioning any names, but the lawyer that represented Saudi had an invoice. Amongst the items there was 100,000 rands, and it was loan repayment. So Mr. van der Merwe, in his, God bless his heart, in his stupidity or wisdom, says, which loan are we repaying? So the invoice tracks back, and eventually it comes to us at the board. And it goes back to the lawyer, and we're saying, what is this for? And he submits a new invoice where he has taken the 100,000 out. We say, we want to know why it was there. What loan is this? He says, no. This was a personal loan that Claudia asked from me, and he said I could include it in this invoice.
Mr. Tsedu, with all that you've explained, and as you say, if the High Court is going to say, we're hanging you, you have gone even further and said, these are the other transgressions, if you see them as transgressions. But nonetheless, a court of law has ruled that what was done by that interim board, persons like you, was wrong. And in essence, the SIU even goes further to say, you must be declared delinquent directors, the interim board of that time, which you were part of. In your view, is that something you prepared to walk with? Because a delinquency order, yes, it will not send you to jail, but it comes with a stigma. You'll be banned for 7 years from being a director of any company, or in extreme circumstances, you can even be, it's for life. Is that something that you're prepared to carry for what you are saying was the effort to prevent corruption at the SABC?
My conscience is clear. And it's not only my conscience that is clear. The SIU's report says in the investigation, they went to the finance, the FICA. It's not FICA. This
Financial Intelligence Center.
Yeah. And got approval to go through all our financial details, everything. They went through our telephones and everything. And in the report itself, they say there was nothing untoward that they could find. If I have to die by not being a director ever again, so be it.
Do you think that with all the mess that we see in the state-owned entities in this country, are there more people like you think, who are prepared to lose it all in terms of the business dealings or business world to prove that I did what I did with honor? I did it in order to avert a disaster. Do you think there are more people like you? And
I hope so. I hope so. I'm not going back into those areas. I'm now a farmer. I worry about ticks on my cattle and foot and mouth disease, and where the food you're going to eat will come from, and whether as a nation we have plans that can enhance our food security as a people. I worry about those. But I hope that there are people who have the stamina to stay the long way. I'm not saying that in technical terms we may not be wrong. I'm not saying that. We may actually be wrong technically. But in order for the correct thing to be done, there may have been administrative misdemeanors that happened. But in the end, the result of our decision, which we took with open eyes, was to stop the rot that was going on. And the the SABC was stabilized. When we were there, we stabilized payments for people. You don't have the time, Xoli. Divisions were ordered that invoices must not all be entered so that the picture of how much is owed shouldn't look too bad. So the Auditor General arrives at our meeting and says, this picture that you are saying is what you owe. It's not even true.
You're right that actually, at the time, it was said that the SABC was R1 billion in the red.
Yeah.
And based on exactly what you've said, that divisions were told, don't put forward your invoices in order to make the picture not as bad as it was.
Yeah.
How deep in the red do you believe it was, the SABC?
Close to 2. Because we then said, if anyone is found with an invoice that has not been entered, they have us to deal with. And then the figure started jumping up and up and up because everybody was opening their drawers and they're taking their cushions off to take the invoices out of there. So, as I'll repeat this. If that is a crime, hang me.
Exactly on that. You also write about Faith Muthambi, who was the minister at the time responsible in her portfolio, the SABC included. And you write about the difficulties you had dealing with her. And then she goes, in comes Ayanda Dlodlo. At a time, I believe you're someone who reads widely. At a time like this, where there is talk about executive interference, or basically, let me put it this way for people to understand, ministers interfering in the work of the board. What would your message be to ministers who are accused of that practice today?
I would say, as a journalist, that it's almost like when you have you are a media house and you are the owner of, let's say, Newzroom Afrika. You define what the path and outlook of this institution is going to be. Then you go out and find the people who will be able to deliver that. If you do that, you don't have to interfere. But if you want to interfere, you then define the goal, but go and find people who are incapable.
So that you can shunt them around.
Yeah.
Wow. Powerful statements you've made here, sir. Thank you very much for your time, and I genuinely wish you well in your farming business.
Yeah. And one of these days you should call me here and we should talk about farming. Especially black media doesn't talk farming. It's Farmers Weekly and all those things. But in real terms, when we live here, we're going to need to eat. Where is that food going to be coming from?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll take that invitation. I'm going to ask you to remain exactly where you are while I link to my next story. Mr. Mathatha Tsedu, a former member of the interim board of 2017. He is unrepentant. He says his conscience is clear. They were dealing with corruption.